Let's look at number 4. Question number 4. What is the second offense, and how did one become a cardinal at that time? Paragraph 2, page 394. Second, of what use to Christendom are those people called cardinals? I shall tell you. Italy and Germany have many rich monasteries, foundations, benefices, and livings. No better way has been discovered to bringing all these to Rome than by creating cardinals and giving them bishoprics, monasteries, and prelacies for their own use, and so overthrowing the worship of God. You can see that Italy is now almost a wilderness, monasteries in ruins, bishoprics despoiled, and prelacies and the revenues of all the churches drawn to Rome. Cities decayed, land and people ruined, because services are no longer held and the word of God is not preached. And why? Because the cardinals must have the income. No Turk could have devastated Italy and suppressed the worship of God so effectively. How did one become a bishop or a cardinal?
Appointed?
You're
or
appointed.
Or they pay to be in that position?
Okay, they have to be appointed. Even in the system today, they have to be appointed. It's not an election except for the pontiff, except for the pope, where the cardinals vote. Otherwise, you're appointed. But in the time of Luther, it was a pay-to-play scenario. It was political. It was financial. You had to pay a certain amount, and then you would get this bishopric. And if you paid enough, you might get another bishopric too, maybe 2 countries over. You never went there, but you were their bishop. And you drew in income from all of these things. And it became a system through which the church was making a lot of money. Bishops would become very wealthy, but also the Vatican was taking money. So there was almost a taxation system inside the church that funded more and more money going to Rome. Number 5. How did cardinals function at the time? Paragraph 1 on page 395. We'll start on 394. Now that Italy is sucked dry, the Romanists are coming to Germany. They have made a gentle beginning, but let us keep our eyes open. Germany shall soon be like Italy. We have some cardinals already. The drunken Germans are not supposed to understand that the Romanists are up to until there's not a bishopric, a monastery, a parish, a benefice, not a single penny left. Antichrist must seize the treasures of the earth, as it is prophesied in Daniel. It works like this. They skim the cream off the bishoprics, monasteries, and benefices, and because they do not yet venture to put them all to shameful use, as they have done in Italy, they in the meantime practice their holy cunning and couple together 10 or 20 prelacies. They then tear off a little piece each year so as to make quite a tidy sum after all. The provostship of Würzburg yields 1,000 gulden. That of the Bamberg also yields a sum, as do Mainz, Trier, and others. In this way, 1,000 or 10,000 gulden may be collected so that a cardinal could live like a wealthy monarch at Rome. How were they operating?
We're operating like those mafiosos that say, let me help you insure your store from bad things happening. Give me money.
Yep. And if they're doing that, if the focus is running a financial system, where is the spiritual leadership? Where's the focus on Christ? And maybe at some point we ought to do a class on church history. That may be interesting.
Yes.
Because we have to understand that, Christendom has had quite a journey by the time we get to this era. The early church is evangelizing, and by the year 312 is in a position that it becomes the dominant religion of the Roman Empire. That was all by word of mouth while it was illegal. The church grew. Then the church was adopted as the official religion of the Roman Empire, and the church assumes a lot of power. Lots of people come into the church, and then we have the decline of the Holy Roman Empire and all the problems that came with that. And Christianity sagged, yet Christianity spread. That's when we had a lot of people that were going off to territories, and we start to hear about the Celts becoming Christians. And we hear of saints, people who are now deemed as saints, who are going in and preaching to territories. And we see the church continuing to spread. And then we see monastic orders being established, monasteries, and abbesses that are building up. And there's this movement of the church. By the time we get to this era, many of those things are old already, dating back to the 7th, 8th, 10th century. And now we're at a different era in the life of the church. And in this era, the cardinals, it's becoming a financial system. And it's not focused on the worship of God and following Christ, nor the leading of the Spirit.
There's a little bit of that in our own political system, with people getting donations, politicians getting donations, and they go into, I don't know this, I don't have proof of it, but this is just what I read about, how they go in not moderately wealthy and come out millionaires.
Yep.
And so it makes you think that they're maybe skimming somewhere, or the donations that people make in order to get favors or whatever. A little bit of
Yep.
Political action committees
yes,
pay them and to vote their way. And
yeah, exactly.
I'm fascinated just observing, because we only have one party in the county at this point, in Galveston County. There is only one party. If you want to be in office, you have to run as a Republican. Democrats do not have the traction in this county to really get elected. So now I'm just sitting back and watching what's going on, and now you hear the grousing between the Republicans, and it's almost as though they're dividing into two little groups. There was an article that Mays Middleton has raised more money than anybody else, and he's spending it because he wants his position, and he's trying to get a better position. And there's something going on, and it's on both. If we look at where if anyone goes to Congress, you're going to come out with more money. Whether you're independent, Republican, or Democrat, they're all benefiting in some way.
That was my point. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just kind of watching and looking at the grousing amongst Republicans and the money, and you can go, there's no system that's totally clean.
Right.
Well,
Right.
for example, in Illinois, there's some of our politicians that were taken to court and have been found guilty and took their money away from them.
Blagojevich.
Yeah, we should have our own little section.
Yeah, really.
We got a
But he
whole-
was pardoned, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was pardoned, yes. But the son of one of the evangelists was not pardoned. He and his wife both had to give up money and spent time in jail.
Wow.
Jackson. The young
Oh,
Jackson
yeah.
and his wife.
Wow.
And it was
So there's
over
some
political
similarities
monies.
there between the
Civil authorities
Romanists
took
or the
charge.
Catholic Church and
And
what's-
government, human
and government. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's the problem. It's human temptation.
Yeah.
It is.
We're
Human.
tempted.
yeah.
We're tempted with. Well, if you go back to what I preached on Sunday, put no trust in humans, in human ways, and that's where people will put their trust. They buy in, and they get sucked deeper and deeper into that, while the scriptures call us trust God. There's a difference. And reform is always good, In Lutheran understanding, we see ourselves as the church reformed and still reforming. That we still are attentive to the work needing to stay focused on Christ and the grace of God for all people. Let's go to question number 6. Question number 6. Side notes 33 through 37 give insight for understanding what was happening in the church at that time. Side notes 33 through 37 on 395. It goes on from there. So, what is described? So he says, on 1st of July 1517, Pope Leo X named 31 cardinals, the largest number ever created in a single consistory until 1946. At the end of Leo's reign, the total number of cardinals was 48, 17 more than it had been at the time of his election in 1513, but only 3 more than it had been in the time of the election of Julius II in 1503. Okay, so knowing what's going on, what do you read into what was happening under Pope Leo X?
He was getting rich.
He was getting rich, and rich players were getting put into spiritual leadership.
Yeah, because they paid to get there.
They paid to get there. 34. It was a common complaint that the College of Cardinals was too large. Its size fed more by the income derived from the fees charged for an appointment to it than by the needs of the church. The 15th century Reformed councils of Constance and Basel had wanted the total number fixed at 24. The actual number at this time tended to hover at around twice that. The idea that the cardinals should be assigned a fixed income rather than endowed with benefices was also a common suggestion in the literature for church reform. The Council of Constance recommended an income of 3,000 to 4,000 gulden. So that one is telling us that in the century prior to the Reformation, these conversations were already taking place. That there were people who recognized we got a problem starting. Note 35. In 1438, Charles VIII of France presided over a synod of French clergy and nobility at Bourges that adopted the so-called pragmatic sanction, which applied to France some of the reform decrees of the Council of Basel. In effect, the pragmatic sanction took control over the election of bishops, abbots, and other benefice holders in France away from the Pope and bestowed it on the crown, thus severely reducing the income derived from such appointments by the Pope or his non-resident appointees. The payment of annates to the Pope was forbidden. In 1516, Pope Leo X and King Francis I concluded the Concordat of Bologna, which replaced the pragmatic sanction but kept many of the provisions. So what is this telling us about what was going on in the life of church at that time?
The Pope was deriving all sorts of income from appointing people, back to Blago and the pay to play. And when the King of France took it over and said, no, I'll appoint them, thank you very much, that cut some of the income, which I'm sure the Pope didn't like.
Yeah. I think it's significant to note that in the century prior to the Reformation, all of this was known. The King of France obviously knew that there was some financial twist happening. Something was not right. He saw money leaving France, not coming to France. And it was all money that was not being used for the care of the poor, the furthering of justice, the caring of widows and orphans. It was doing nothing but it was power money moving around and all heading toward Rome. So what Luther is lifting up is not suddenly new, but Luther is lifting it up as a continual problem, a problem that needs addressing. And the German nobility can address it if they trust God. Let's look at question number 7. Question number 7. What is the third offense? So in paragraph, paragraph 4 on page 395. If 99% of the papal court were abolished and only 1% kept, it would still be large enough to give answers in matters of faith. What is he hinting at there?
It's too big.
Top heavy.
Top heavy. That the worldliness of the church at that time was driving, these systems bigger and bigger and bigger, and it really wasn't doing the function of church. It wasn't addressing spiritual matters. It wasn't furthering the faith. There was something else. Good. Question number 8. Question number 8. What is Luther saying in paragraph 1 on 396? And this is midway down toward the end of that paragraph. This money serves no use or purpose. We get nothing for it except scorn and contempt, and we still go on wondering why princes and nobles, cities and endowments, land and people grow poor. We ought to marvel that we have anything left to eat. So what is he getting at?
They're not getting anything for the money they're sending to the church.
Yeah.
They're becoming poor.
That the Rome acts like a vacuum cleaner, sucking up all the finances, all the wealth, and people are struggling. He says, it's surprising that we have anything to eat at all, because everything is being sucked away. The people are suffering. The people are struggling. Now, we also have to understand that the systems at the time, this was not democracy, this was not the American ideal or dream, this was nothing like that. There was a class system. If you were a farmer, most likely you did not own your own property. You lived on the property of a landed gentry, of someone who was of low noble estate or something. And you could not, in many places, you could not move without permission. And you worked that farm, and there was a part of it that you got to take care of your family, but you owed a large amount of it to the landowner. The systems were very different, but at the same way, the responsibility of the landed gentry and of the nobility was for the well-being of all people. They were responsible for the outcome of what would happen to the families on their land. Do any of you watch Father Brown on PBS?
No.
Oh, Thursday night, 7 o'clock. It's one of our favorite programs. It's clean. There's always a murder, basically. And Father Brown is the sleuth who figures it out. And Mrs. McCarthy is a little gossip. And then we have one of those kind of freewheeling noble ladies. It's a great show we think of it as such, Corinne and I. I saw one last week, and it was an issue of the landed gentry. The family was running out of money. They were almost bankrupt, and they want to sell off their property. And there's a controversy over, but what about the people living on your land? You're responsible for them. And see, that's the part of the system that we maybe don't conceptualize well. because we don't think of it that way in our system. You know, if somebody is on our land, well, we're not responsible for them. We're renting to them, or we're in agreement that they're going to give so much of the harvest of the field for the privilege of being on our land, but we're not responsible. But in the European system of the time, the nobility, the landed gentry, were responsible. Now, and so Luther's looking at this and he's seeing, well, the landed gentry, the nobility, everyone's being sucked dry of their funds, and it's the people. Those people can't do what they're supposed to do for the people they're responsible for. Yeah. Maybe a lesson from school. I suspect we all learned about a king or queen, that the king or queen's responsibility was to protect their people. You know, that's what the castle, you know, that in case of a bad thing happening, you would go to the castle for protection. That's why the cities would have walls, and it was the king's responsibility to keep the people safe. That's what we're talking about. It's in that kind of environment, but those people are being sucked dry to send money to Rome, to the Pope. Problems.